What's up everyone? In this video we're going to learn about grouping different elements into one single container as well as creating different types of lists. This will clean up our page quite a lot. So I'll see you in a second. Alright, welcome back everyone. So in the previous video we've created that contact form, but one thing that I don't really like about it is all the elements are on the same line because they are inline elements. So how can we fix that? Well, one way to fix that is going to be introducing the break tag, and notice if we refresh the page now the first name is going to be on its own line, but I don't really like that idea. Another way we can do that is by introducing the new element which is going to be called the div element. And the div element is pretty much a grouping element. This is the container element. This is an element that's going to contain other elements inside of it, and this is pretty much a generic element, so it's kind of like the section, but the section defines a section within your content, whereas div is more generic. It's mostly used for something like styling. So when you use CSS and you want to style a group of elements such as these two elements, the label and the input, you can put them inside of that div container, and now the div container is going to contain the label and the input. And one cool thing about that is div is going to be block level element. Remember previously we've talked about the difference between the block level and input level elements? Well, the difference between them is block level elements are going to take as much space as they can, when the inline elements are going to take as much space as they need to take. So thus label and input being inline elements, they're going to be side by side. They're going to be grouped together and they're not going to be on the separate lines. But when we wrap them in a div tag, now these two elements are going to be enclosed within the block level elements. And if we take a look at the page, notice that first name now is on its own level. It takes up the whole width of the page. And we can do the exact same thing for every single element or group of elements that we have. We're going to contain them basically, and let's do the same thing for the text area. And let's also remove rows and columns. I don't really like how big it is. And let's remove that white space to make it look pretty. Refresh the page and notice now every single element on its own page. So this is how you're going to be using divs, and most likely you will also be including class attributes in order to style that element with CSS, but since we don't know any CSS right now, we're not going to worry too much about it. So one thing to keep in mind is that div element is a block level element that's going to be a container for other elements inside of it. Let's go ahead and explore other container element that we have, and the other container element is going to be the span. And let's go ahead and put it inside of the paragraph on line 38. So the difference between the div and the span is that the span is inline container element. So spans are going to be useful when you want to group several words together inside of the paragraph, for example. So we can do hello students. And now if we save the page and explore the JavaScript article over here, we get that hello students. And now these two words are pretty much grouped in the same container. And remember what we can do? We can go ahead and inspect the page, and notice right now if we go ahead and use that selector tool over here, the top left corner of the DevTools, we can hover over that hello students, and now they are grouped inside of the spans. So it's pretty much in its own container. And once again, you would use it for something like CSS when you decide to style your text. So let's reiterate on that. Divs are going to be block level containers, when spans are going to be inline level containers. Another thing that I wanted to talk about is how to create lists with HTML. So let's go ahead, open up our Explorer, create the new file, call it lists.html, and right click on it, click on copy path and paste the path in the browser. So now we got our empty HTML file. Now let's go ahead and close that basics HTML, we don't really need that, and pre-fill it with some boilerplate code. Perfect. Now you can close the Explorer. So let's go ahead and explore some lists. Change the document to be lists. And in HTML, we have different types of lists. So let's say we want to create the recipe and list up all the ingredients. So what we can do is we can create the H1 tag and we can say ingredients, or if I can spell ingredients. And now we want to list out the ingredients. And the tag that we're going to be using is going to be called UL, which stands for unordered list. This is pretty much one of two main types of lists that we have in HTML. So the way that you create those list element is by specifying the type of list. In that case, it's going to be unordered list. And then we need to create different elements inside of it. And the elements that we're going to be using are going to be called LI, which is going to be basically list item. So the first ingredient is going to be, let's say, salt. And let's save it and refresh the page. And now you can see that we get that heading saying ingredients, and then we get that salt, which is the first ingredient. And notice we have that little circle over here, that black circle, which means that this is the first list element from that unordered list. So go ahead and create another list item and call it pepper. Save the file, refresh the page, and now we got salt and pepper. And they are not ordered, right? It's just those little dots. So this is something that you get with unordered list. Of course, you can change it later with CSS, but since we don't know any CSS right now and we're just doing HTML, this is how it's going to look like by default. So let's go ahead and create another list item. We're going to call it X. And one thing that I want to mention is don't be afraid of nesting elements. You can go ahead and create B tag inside of that list item and put your eggs inside of that B to make it look bold. And if we refresh it, now we see that X is in bold. Another type of list that we have is going to be called ordered list, and the tag for that is going to be OL. So the structure is going to be pretty much the same. We're going to have list items inside of the ordered list, and we can call it, I don't know, boil eggs. Then we're going to have another list item saying add salt, and another one saying add pepper. And we're going to call it, I don't know, let's call it steps. Now let's go ahead and refresh the page and notice the difference. The ordered list actually gives order to the element, and by default it's going to be numbers from 1 to 3 in this case. And one thing that you can do with ordered list, you can also provide the type attribute, and for type attribute you can provide 1, which is going to be our numbers, and you can change 1 to be A, which is going to start with A and go ABC, basically something that's going to be useful for tests if you have tests on your HTML page. And other ones would be Roman numerals. You can do lowercase I, refresh the page, now we get those Roman numerals, and you can also go with uppercase I, and now you get these. So one thing to remember, whenever you create lists, don't forget to specify the type of the list and then nest your list item inside of that type. So in this example, we have list item salt, pepper, and next inside of the unordered list, and here we have those tabs inside of the ordered list. And that's going to be it for that video. In the next video, we're going to talk about tables and images, and that's going to be it for the HTML tutorial. So I'll catch you in the next one.